The galaxy was vast, filled with civilizations that had mastered energy weapons, faster than light travel, and molecular engineering. Among these advanced empires was the Zytrix Dominion, a race of technologically superior beings who saw themselves as the pinnacle of evolution. When they turned their attention to Earth, it was with disdain, dismissing humanity as a primitive species barely worth conquering. In the central chamber of the Zytrix High Command, holograms of Earth flickered. High Commander Lyrak, towering and encased in a crystalline armor powered by quantum energy, sneered at the display of human weaponry. Combustion engines, projectile weapons, steel armor. How quaint! His voice dripped with contempt. This will not be a conquest. It will be a demonstration of superiority. The other generals nodded, their faces glowing with an alien arrogance that had been earned through centuries of unchallenged domination. They had subjugated dozens of planets with minimal resistance. Earth would be no different, or so they believed. Meanwhile, on Earth, the mood was grim but determined. Humanity had seen the initial fleet descending from orbit, shimmering crafts that darkened the skies over major cities. The invaders wasted no time, unleashing their plasma bombardments and reducing key infrastructure to molten ruins. Civilians were evacuated to underground shelters, while what remained of Earth's military scrambled to prepare. In one of these hastily fortified zones, a dusty hangar stood amidst the chaos. Inside, a weathered M1 Abrams tank gleamed under the dim fluorescent lights. It was a relic from a bygone era. Long retired from service, its paint chipped, and its treads worn. But it was functional, and for the crew standing around it, that was enough. Primitive tech, one soldier muttered, running his hand along the cold steel. His voice was laced with bitterness. That's what they called it in those broadcasts. Guess we'll see how primitive it feels when this beast starts firing. An older officer, gray-haired and battle-scarred, tightened his gloves. This isn't about matching their tech. It's about using what we've got smarter than they do. They think we're inferior because we don't fight the way they do. That's their mistake. As the Zytrix troops deployed their sleek war machines, hover tanks with plasma cannons, mechanized infantry with energy shields, the contrast between the two forces couldn't have been more stark. Their machines glided silently across the battlefield, shimmering with futuristic precision, while the M1 Abrams roared to life, its diesel engine growling like a defiant beast from a forgotten age. The aliens moved with calculated efficiency, their commanders confident that no human weapon could pierce their advanced defenses. They deployed minimal forces for what they deemed a cleanup operation, expecting the humans to scatter or surrender outright. But they underestimated the crew inside that tank. They underestimated the human spirit. As the M1 Abrams rolled forward, its cannon loaded and its turret scanning the horizon, the crew spoke in hushed tones. Each knew the odds were against them, but none hesitated. This was their home, their fight, and if humanity's survival depended on their so-called primitive weapon, so be it. Targets on the ridge, came the call from the gunner. Hold steady, the commander ordered. Through the gunner's sight, alien hover tanks shimmered, their plasma cannons glowing ominously. The gunner exhaled, steadying his aim. Fire! The tank shook as the round shot forth, a streak of steel and fury cutting through the air. It struck its target, a Zytrix hover tank, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening explosion, the alien vehicle disintegrated, its advanced shielding unable to withstand the force of kinetic energy delivered with pinpoint precision. Across the battlefield, the Zytrix soldiers froze. Their commanders barked orders, demanding explanations. How could such primitive technology bypass their defenses? The Abrams crew didn't wait for the aliens to recover. They loaded another round, moving to a new position before firing again. Another hover tank erupted into flames. Inside their armored command centers, Zytrix generals began to realize their error. They had assumed Earth's reliance on older technology was a weakness. But they had failed to account for the tactical ingenuity, the stubborn resilience, and the raw ferocity of humanity in the face of extinction. As the M1 Abrams continued its assault, the alien forces scrambled to regroup. Plasma bolts lit up the sky, but the tank moved with surprising speed, using the terrain to its advantage. The crew operated with precision honed by years of training and an unshakable determination to protect their world. Primitive, they had called it, but the Zytrix were starting to learn. In the hands of those with everything to lose, even the simplest weapon could become unstoppable. The air crackled with tension as the M1 Abrams rolled into position, its armored bulk cutting through the ruins of a once bustling city. Alien drones buzzed overhead, scanning for threats, but the tank crew moved deliberately, using the shadows of collapsed buildings to mask their approach. The commander's voice came through the comms, calm and measured. "Hold your nerve. They don't see us yet." Beyond their position, the Zytrix forces were setting up their forward operations post. Alien engineers worked swiftly, deploying energy barriers that shimmered like liquid glass around their encampment. Hover tanks floated silently, their plasma cannons gleaming under the overcast sky. Infantry units, clad in armor that absorbed and reflected light, moved with clockwork precision. The Zytrix commander overseeing the operation was unbothered by the reports of resistance. "The humans are scattered," he declared to his officers. "Let them come. Their primitive tools will crumble against our defenses." His tone dripped with arrogance, a hallmark of a race untested by failure. The Abrams crew watched through the tank's periscopes, studying the enemy's movements. The gunner adjusted his sights, marking key targets. "They've got shields up. We won't crack those with a frontal assault." The commander smirked. "Good thing we're not frontal assault types." "Load Sabo." Inside the tank, the loader worked quickly, sliding the armor-piercing round into the chamber. The gunner adjusted the elevation, his crosshairs settling on a hover tank positioned just inside the shield's edge. A moment of silence hung heavy in the air before the commander gave the order. "Fire." The tank's cannon roared, the Sabo round streaking toward its target. The shield rippled as the projectile made contact, and for a fraction of a second, it seemed as though it had been deflected. Then the round punched through, striking the hover tank's reactor core. The resulting explosion sent a shockwave rippling through the encampment, tearing apart nearby structures and throwing alien troops into disarray. Chaos erupted. Zytrix soldiers scrambled to respond, their confidence shaken. Orders were shouted in an alien tongue, and the remaining hover tanks began repositioning to hunt down the source of the attack. The Abrams crew, already on the move, shifted to a new firing position before the enemy could zero in on them. Plasma bolts rained down from above, scorching the ground and igniting debris. The tank rocked as a near miss sent shrapnel pinging off its hull, but the crew pressed on, their training and instincts guiding them. "Target the turret emplacement," the commander ordered. The gunner swung the barrel around, aligning the sights with a towering structure that housed a plasma cannon. Another round was loaded, and the cannon fired. The turret exploded in a cascade of molten metal and energy, silencing one of the enemy's primary defenses. The Zytrix commander was no longer calm. He barked orders to his subordinates, demanding a coordinated counterattack. But the aliens, so reliant on their technology and automated systems, struggled to adapt to the Abrams' unconventional tactics. The tank crew exploited every weakness they could find. They used smoke rounds to obscure their movements, setting up ambushes in the narrow streets. They targeted supply drones, cutting off the enemy's ammunition and repair capabilities. Every shot counted, every maneuver carefully calculated to keep the aliens off balance. Despite their superior firepower, the Zytrix found themselves at a disadvantage. Their hover tanks, built for open battlefields, struggled in the confined urban environment. Their energy shields, designed to repel plasma and energy-based attacks, were vulnerable to the raw kinetic force of the Abrams rounds. The battle raged on, the city echoing with the sounds of explosions and the metallic screech of collapsing structures. The Abrams crew pushed forward, their confidence growing with each victory. They knew they were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched in terms of technology, but they also knew the enemy's weakness: their overconfidence. "Another hit," the loader said, his voice tinged with satisfaction as another hover tank erupted into flames. "They're pulling back," the driver observed, watching through the periscope as the alien troops began retreating toward the far side of the city. The commander nodded. They'll regroup. Let's make sure they don't get the chance. The crew pushed the tank harder, cutting through the enemy's lines with precision strikes. The Zytrix forces, once so sure of their dominance, found themselves retreating under the relentless assault of a single primitive machine. For the first time in centuries, they tasted the bitter sting of defeat. The Zytrix commander, watching the battle unfold from his command post, clenched his fists. "This is impossible," he muttered. "How can they?" His words trailed off as another explosion lit up the horizon, the Abrams cutting down another target with ruthless efficiency. It was clear to everyone on the battlefield, humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. And they were showing the Zytrix that primitive didn't mean powerless. The Zytrix forces, humiliated by their losses, escalated their response. From orbit, reinforcements were dispatched, and heavier war machines descended to the battlefield. Among them was the pride of their arsenal, a towering quadrupedal mech armed with plasma cannons, energy lances, and impenetrable shielding. This mechanical colossus dwarfed everything around it, its every step shaking the ground as it advanced toward the city ruins. Inside the M1 Abrams, the crew prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The gunner adjusted his sights, tracking the mech's slow, deliberate movements. "That thing's a fortress. We're going to need more than a lucky shot." The commander didn't flinch. "We've taken out their best before. We'll do it again." The Zytrix, however, were no longer underestimating the humans. Their hover tanks and infantry moved in tight formations, creating a layered defense to protect the mech's advance. Plasma turrets were deployed across rooftops, covering potential ambush points. The air hummed with the sound of drones, scanning every corner for the Abrams. The aliens had learned to respect the tank's destructive power, and they were determined to overwhelm it with sheer numbers. The tank crew didn't hesitate. They moved quickly, using the city's dense terrain to their advantage. Smoke rounds created cover as they repositioned, avoiding detection. The gunner focused on eliminating the smaller threats first, hover tanks and infantry squads that strayed too far from the main group. One by one, the targets fell, explosions lighting up the ruins as the Abrams systematically dismantled the alien forces. The Zytrix commander overseeing the operation grew impatient. "Enough of this cat-and-mouse game," he barked. "Deploy the mech. Crush them." The mech advanced, its plasma cannons firing in wide arcs. Buildings crumbled under the barrage, the streets reduced to molten craters. The Abrams narrowly avoided the initial onslaught, its treads grinding over rubble as it darted between cover. The tank crew felt the heat of the plasma blasts, the air inside the cabin stifling, but they remained focused. "We can't take it head-on," the loader said, his voice tense. "We're not going to," the commander replied. "We'll make it come to us." The Abrams moved deeper into the ruins, drawing the mech away from its support. The crew fired at its legs, testing the armor's strength. The rounds glanced off, barely leaving a mark, but the mech turned its attention to the tank, drawn by the challenge. The crew led the mech into a narrow street lined with the remains of tall buildings. The towering war machine followed, its bulk barely fitting between the crumbling structures. The gunner waited until the mech was fully committed to the path before firing at the base of a damaged building. The structure collapsed in an avalanche of debris, momentarily halting the mech's advance. "Reload," the commander ordered. The tank fired again, targeting the exposed joints of the mech's legs. This time, the round found a weak spot, shattering one of the mech's hydraulic systems. The massive machine stumbled, its balance compromised, but it didn't fall. Instead, it unleashed another barrage of plasma fire, forcing the Abrams to retreat further into the ruins. The battle became a deadly game of maneuver and countermaneuver. The Abrams crew used every trick at their disposal, exploiting the mech's size and limited mobility. They lured it into tight spaces, used smoke to obscure their movements, and targeted its vulnerable points with precision. The Zytrix forces, watching from their command center, were stunned. This single tank was not only surviving but holding its own against their most advanced weapon. The Zytrix commander clenched his jaw, his earlier confidence replaced with frustration. "How can they be doing this?" he demanded. "It's just a machine." "It's not the machine," one of his subordinates replied quietly. "It's them." The turning point came when the Abrams crew executed their boldest move yet. Luring the mech into an open courtyard, they fired a round at its head, drawing its attention upward. The mech raised its plasma cannons to retaliate, exposing its underbelly, its one unshielded area. "Now," the commander shouted. The gunner fired, the round striking true. The explosion ripped through the mech's core, sending shards of metal and energy cascading outward. The massive machine collapsed, its legs buckling under its weight. For a moment, there was silence as the dust settled, the once unstoppable war machine reduced to smoldering wreckage. The Zytrix forces, witnessing the destruction of their greatest weapon, began to falter. Their formations broke, their soldiers retreating in disarray. The Abrams, battered but still operational, pushed forward, targeting the remaining hover tanks and turrets. As the battle wound down, the crew sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they had accomplished sinking in. "Primitive," the driver muttered, shaking his head. "They still think we're primitive." The commander smirked. "Let them. It makes the victories that much sweeter." Across the battlefield, the remnants of the Zytrix forces fell back, their morale shattered. The once dominant invaders, armed with the most advanced technology in the galaxy, had been humbled by a weapon they had deemed obsolete. But the truth was clear now. It wasn't the technology that had defeated them. It was the people who wielded it. The battlefield was silent now, save for the faint crackle of fires burning in the wreckage. Alien bodies and shattered war machines lay scattered across the landscape, the Zytrix forces having retreated in disarray. From the command post aboard their hovering mothership, High Commander Lyrak observed the aftermath with cold disbelief. His once unshakable confidence had crumbled. "This was supposed to be a demonstration of power," he muttered. His officers avoided his gaze, their own pride wounded by the catastrophic failure. How could they destroy the mech? It was invincible. A junior officer hesitated before speaking. "Commander, it's not their weapons. It's their tactics. Their unpredictability." He paused, unsure if he should continue, but Lyrak's glare demanded an explanation. "They don't rely on algorithms or precision alone. They adapt. They improvise. Their determination surpasses logic." Lyrak slammed his fist against the console, the force cracking the crystalline surface. "Enough excuses. Withdraw the remaining forces. This planet is no longer worth the effort." The Zytrix fleet began its retreat, their pride as an empire irreparably damaged. Across Earth, humanity emerged from the ruins, battered but unbroken. In the midst of this triumph, the M1 Abrams stood as a symbol of defiance. Its hull was scorched, its paint chipped, and its treads worn, but it was still standing. Inside the tank, the crew took a moment to catch their breath. The driver wiped sweat from his brow, glancing at the smoldering remains of the mech through the periscope. "Never thought I'd see the day we'd bring down something like that." The loader chuckled, leaning back in his seat. "Who needs fancy tech when you've got grit?" The commander nodded, his expression stoic but satisfied. "They underestimated us. That was their first mistake. Their second was thinking they could break us." As word of the victory spread, scattered resistance forces across the globe found renewed hope. Reports came in of alien outposts being abandoned, their troops withdrawing to regroup. The Zytrix had come to Earth expecting to crush humanity underfoot, but instead, they left in shame, their loss is a testament to their failure. In a bunker deep beneath the ruins of a city, leaders of Earth's military and civilian governments gathered to assess the situation. A live feed displayed the wreckage left in the wake of the Abrams campaign. There was a grim sense of pride in the room. "We've shown them what we're capable of," one general said, his voice firm. "But this isn't the end. They'll be back, and next time, they won't underestimate us." Another leader leaned forward, his expression resolute. "Then we'll be ready. We've proven that it's not about the tools but the hands that wield them. If they return, we'll meet them with the same determination." Above ground, civilians began to emerge, surveying the damage but also the symbols of victory. The wreckage of the Zytrix mech became a rallying point, a monument to humanity's resilience. Children marveled at the towering ruin, while survivors shared stories of the battle that had turned the tide. The M1 Abrams, its crew standing beside it, became a focal point of attention. A young boy approached cautiously, his face smeared with dirt, but his eyes wide with admiration. "Is this the tank that stopped them?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. The gunner crouched down, smiling faintly. "It's just a machine. What stopped them was us. All of us, working together." The boy nodded, though his gaze lingered on the tank. It wasn't just a machine to him. It was a symbol of hope. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the battlefield, humanity began the slow process of rebuilding. But amidst the ruins, a message was spreading, one that would echo far beyond Earth. Footage of the battle had been captured and transmitted to other planets within the Zytrix dominion. Oppressed civilizations watched in stunned silence as they saw the mighty invaders brought low by a primitive species. In hidden corners of the galaxy, whispers began to grow louder. If humanity could stand against the Zytrix, then perhaps others could too. The cracks in the Dominion's reign of terror began to widen, sparked by a single act of defiance on a backwater planet they had dismissed as insignificant. The Zytrix, retreating to their strongholds, faced an uncertain future. Their dominance had been challenged, their reputation as an invincible force tarnished. High Commander Lyrak, pacing in his quarters, reviewed the battle reports obsessively. The M1 Abrams, its capabilities, and the tactics employed by its crew were now the subject of intense analysis. "This isn't over," he vowed quietly. "We will adapt. We will return." But deep down, a seed of doubt had taken root. For all their advanced technology, the Zytrix had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by the indomitable spirit of a species they had dismissed as primitive. Back on Earth, the tank commander stood atop the Abrams, surveying the horizon. The air was heavy with smoke, but there was a sense of calm now, a moment to breathe after the chaos. "Think they'll come back?" the driver asked, breaking the silence. "They might," the commander replied. "But if they do, they'll know what to expect. And so will we." The loader leaned against the tank, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Primitive, my ass. Let's see them call us that again." The crew shared a quiet laugh, the tension finally easing. The tank had done its job, and so had they. In the face of overwhelming odds, they had stood their ground, proving that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology, but its will to fight for survival. As the stars began to emerge in the night sky, one thought lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the battle. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, the lesson was clear. Earth would not bow. Primitive or not, they were a force to be reckoned with.